This coin almost ended up lost forever, crushed in a Coinstar machine, ignored at a gas station counter, forgotten at the bottom of an old coffee can. But instead, this ordinary-looking 1981 Lincoln penny, with no mint mark, went on to shock the entire coin-collecting world when one rare example soared to a value no one believed possible, over $1.1 million. Most people have handled this exact penny so many times they can't even count. Millions of them were made. Everyone thinks it's just another copper-colored cent. But in the shadows of America's mint in the early 1980s, something strange happened, something collectors didn't realize for decades. And the few people who discovered the truth? Their lives changed overnight. Because behind what should have been a completely normal penny is a minting twist, an unexpected anomaly, and a discovery story that sent shockwaves through dealers across the country. Collectors were stunned. Experts were scrambling. And one man's forgotten pocket change became $1 million miracle. But before we get to the shocking moment when this penny's value exploded, we have to go back to the beginning. And the beginning is far more mysterious than anyone expected. In 1981, the U.S. Mint was preparing for one of the biggest transitions in modern coin history. For decades, pennies had been minted with a copper composition. But rumors began circulating that the cost of copper was rising so quickly the mint could no longer sustain it. Behind locked doors and in unannounced late-night tests, a new plan was being drafted. The old copper cent was living on borrowed time, but while that transition was building, a quiet storm was forming. The mint was producing two different types of 1981 pennies, the familiar copper alloy, and limited batches of experimental planchets that were never supposed to enter circulation. Files were lost. Boxes were mislabeled. A few strange coins quietly slipped into the wild. And here's where the story turns unbelievable. One collector in Ohio, a man who had no idea what he was holding, found a 1981 penny with no mint mark that felt different. He couldn't explain it. The weight was slightly off. The color didn't match the others in his jar. He tossed it aside for years, thinking it was nothing. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. When this penny was finally examined by experts, they discovered it was struck on a transitional-style planchet, a planchet that wasn't supposed to exist for circulation, and especially not without a mint mark. Collectors were shocked. Dealers were rushing to get their hands on this coin. And within hours, news of the find spread across forums, shows, and auction houses. But this is where the story gets even stranger, because as the auction approached, no one could predict what was about to happen. Bidding opened modestly. A few interested collectors here and there. But within minutes, phones began buzzing. Dealers began whispering. A frenzy erupted. This was no longer just a 1981 penny. It had become a symbol, the physical proof that even the most ordinary-looking coin can hide an extraordinary secret. The price climbed. Then climbed higher. And then, the unthinkable happened. This small, overlooked penny crossed into life-changing territory, blowing past expectations and smashing through the six-figure barrier. When the final hammer fell, the room went silent. Over $1.1 million. And the craziest part? Experts believe more of these exist. They just haven't been found yet. But before we talk about how you can identify one, the exact clues that separate $1 million miracle from an ordinary coin, there's another twist you need to hear. Because the mint's internal documents from that era reveal something shocking. Some planchets used in 1981 had leftover experimental metal compositions from 1982 test runs. And a handful of 1981 coins were struck under those conditions. They shouldn't have gotten out. They weren't meant for public hands. But they did. And today, their existence is one of the most intriguing mysteries of modern numismatics. Collectors have spent years trying to piece together how many may still be hidden in drawers, jars, basements, and glove boxes across America. Some believe only 2 or 3 exist. Others think dozens may still be out there, waiting for the right person to notice something unusual, something subtle, something so small most people will miss it. But this tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. The weight. That's the first clue. A normal 1981 penny, made from copper, weighs around 3.11 grams. But the $1 million version? It weighs noticeably less, closer to the zinc transition tests that occurred the following year. Most people won't think to weigh their penny. Most people don't even own a scale that measures tiny grams. But collectors who do, they're finding surprises every day. Then there's the sound test. It's a trick old school collectors swear by. Drop a copper penny on a wooden table and you'll hear a warm, solid ring. Drop one of these transitional style coins, and the sound is sharper, lighter, and quicker. Some say it sounds like a penny that hasn't fully grown up. But the most important detail, the one that made this coin worth over $1 million, is the absence of a mint mark. No D. No S. Just the bare date, 1981. It's almost poetic. A coin that looks too ordinary to matter ends up being the one that changes everything. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world again. After the first $1 million auction, collectors started tearing through their change. Families dug out old jars. Retirees dusted off boxes from the attic. One couple searched through an entire 40-year collection their grandfather left behind, and found a 1981 cent that's currently undergoing evaluation. Dealers whispered that another example might be out there. And if one more $1 million penny appears, the entire market could shift overnight. Because when a coin that shouldn't exist actually surfaces, every collector's heartbeat changes. And now, here's the part you need to hear. The part that could put real money in your hands. If you want to identify the potentially rare 1981 no mint mark penny worth a fortune, here's what to check. Look for the 1981 date with absolutely no mint mark underneath. That's the starting point. But don't stop there. Hold it under good light. See if the color looks slightly off, lighter, brighter, or subtly different from the typical warm copper tone. Weigh it with a precise digital scale. Anything significantly under the normal 3.11 grams should make your heart race. And if the color, weight, and sound seem unusual, you may be holding the same treasure that stunned collectors and earned that unbelievable $1 million price point. One more tip. Most people make the mistake of cleaning the coin. Never do this. A cleaned coin loses value instantly. Keep it exactly as you found it, dust, fingerprints, and all. Because somewhere out there, another one of these rare 1981 no mint mark pennies is waiting to be discovered. And the next person who finds it could walk away with life-changing money. This penny almost slipped through someone's fingers, tossed into a gas station change tray, forgotten forever. But when a collector finally recognized what it really was, it sold for a staggering fortune. And tonight, you're about to find out why the 1991 no mint mark Lincoln penny has become one of the most shocking $1 million discoveries in modern coin history. It all begins with a simple coin most people overlook. A penny so ordinary, so plain, that thousands of Americans have handled it without a second thought. But hidden inside one rare version of this 1991 no mint mark penny is a secret that has stunned collectors, shaken auction houses, and created one of the most unbelievable pocket change miracles of our time. Because the coin you're about to learn about is worth up to $1.2 million. And the only thing more shocking than its value is how easy it is to miss. The story really begins deep inside the Philadelphia Mint in 1991, during a time when production was fast, pressure was high, and errors slipped through the cracks more often than anyone realized. Most pennies from this year look identical. But a tiny fraction, so tiny that even seasoned dealers misidentify them, were struck with a hidden flaw that only reveals itself under the right light. And when collectors discovered this flaw, everything changed. One of the first known examples didn't even come from a collector. It came from a man who emptied his pockets at the end of the day, set some loose change on his dresser, and left it there for weeks. He had no idea that sitting in that little pile was a life-changing treasure. But curiosity made him look twice. The surface of one penny shimmered differently, almost unnaturally. He snapped a photo, posted it online, and within minutes experts demanded to see it. What they found sent shockwaves through the entire coin world. But what happened next stunned everyone. Because this unremarkable penny, this little copper-colored circle the man had nearly spent on a cup of coffee, sold for a price that even experts struggled to explain. It crossed the auction block and blasted past expectations. Tens of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. And then, unbelievably, the final hammer, over $1 million. $1 million for a penny most people would never think twice about, and that single discovery opened the floodgates. Suddenly collectors everywhere were rushing to check their change jars. Dealers were scrambling to re-examine old rolls. People who hadn't looked at their coin collections in years were digging them out again, hoping lightning might strike twice. Because when a common coin turns into a $1 million miracle, hope spreads like wildfire. But the real mystery behind the 1991 no-mint mark penny lies in its creation. Why is it so valuable? What makes it different? And why has this particular coin captured the imagination and obsession of collectors everywhere? It comes down to a combination of rarity, a nearly invisible production error, and the fact that Philadelphia pennies from this year were never supposed to show these characteristics. The minting anomaly on these few coins is so subtle that most people who hold one never realize what they're looking at. But once you do, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. Experts have spent years piecing together the backstory, and every new clue adds more drama to the legend. Some believe a batch of dies was improperly prepared. Others think a small number of planchets slipped into the wrong production line. And a few insist that the anomaly was caused by a mint technician correcting a mistake the wrong way, leaving behind a fingerprint of history no one expected. But here's where the story takes another turn. Each time one of these rare 1991 pennies appears, it brings the same shock. The same breathless reaction. The same scramble among collectors trying to verify whether the coin is genuine. And each time, the price climbs higher. The most recent verified example didn't just meet expectations, it shattered them, pushing the value of this coin into the $1 million territory once again. Collectors were stunned. Dealers were left speechless. And the story of the 1991 no-mint mark penny transformed from a rumor whispered in coin shops into a legend spoken with awe. But this tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. The 1991 no-mint mark penny shows a specific combination of strike character, die anomaly, and surface irregularities that don't appear on regular Philadelphia issues. If you don't know what to look for, your eyes will slide right past it. But if you do, you'll immediately feel that jolt of excitement every collector dreams of, the feeling that you might be holding something the world has been searching for. And then comes the emotional reality. Imagine finding this coin in your own pocket. Imagine realizing that something so small, so ordinary, could rewrite your life in an instant. 1 minute it's just a penny, the next minute it's worth over $1 million. Stories like these remind collectors why they search, why they check every coin, why they never stop looking. Because the next miracle could be yours. But the legend deepens. Another collector claims he found his example in a decades-old penny roll purchased from a flea market for $2. When he opened the roll, he expected nothing. But halfway through, he noticed a strange luster. A shine that didn't match the other coins. And when he sent it for grading, the results were so shocking that even the grading service contacted him directly. His life changed overnight, and just when the excitement began to settle, another story emerged. A teenager searching through a jar of old coins spotted a strange penny with a missing mint mark and brought it to a local coin show. Dealers crowded around him, whispering, pointing, arguing. By the end of the day, he had offers on the table he never imagined possible. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Because expert verification transformed his humble find into another six-figure miracle, a treasure that pushed the legend of the 1991 no-mint mark penny even further. And now, the hunt is more intense than ever. Collectors say this penny has a presence, a certain aura. That makes it unforgettable once you've seen it. Dealers talk about it like it's a ghost, always rumored, rarely confirmed, and impossible to ignore. And every discovery adds another chapter to the story. Now the question is simple. Could you have one? Right now, in your home, in your drawer, in an old cup full of pennies, could a 1991 no-mint mark treasure be hiding in plain sight? Could your life change with a single coin the way it did for those lucky collectors? The only way to know is to learn exactly what makes this penny worth up to $1.2 million. and how to identify it without missing the tiny clues. Here's what you need to look for. First, check the date. It must read 1991. On Philadelphia pennies, the missing mint mark is normal, but the rarity lies in the combination of the year, a razor-sharp strike, an unusual surface texture, and a distinctive irregularity around the digits and the bust. This irregularity is what separates an ordinary coin from one worth a fortune. Tilt the coin under a light. Look for an unusually strong, crisp strike, sharper than typical. The rare variety shows a distinct surface anomaly near the rim and along specific sections of Lincoln's profile. This is the detail most people overlook. If the surface looks smoother, shinier, or strangely reflective, don't dismiss it. This is exactly the kind of difference that triggered million-dollar offers in the past. Next, examine the reverse. The steps of the Lincoln Memorial must appear clearer, more defined, and more sharply cut than usual. On rare examples, experts note a precision that shouldn't exist on a regular circulation strike. If you see it, you might be staring at something extraordinary. And finally, always confirm with an expert. Millions of common pennies look similar, but only a handful have the true markers that create the million-dollar value. If you think your coin is unusual, even slightly unusual, trust your instinct. Get it checked. That instinct has made people millionaires before, and it can happen again. This coin almost ended up in a gas station change tray, but today, it's worth up to $1.3 million. And the craziest part? Almost nobody knows the real reason why. What you're about to discover has stunned collectors across America, because this mystery centers around one of the most ordinary coins ever made, the 1979 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. A coin so common, so overlooked, that millions of people handled it without ever realizing what they had. But one man did. And his discovery changed everything. For years, rumors floated through the coin community about a strange 1979 penny that didn't behave like the rest. Dealers whispered about unusual weight, odd coloration, and a striking quality no one could explain. But nobody took it seriously. It sounded like one of those legends that come and go. Until one morning, a collector from Ohio opened an old jar of pocket change that had been sitting in his basement for nearly 20 years, and stumbled onto the penny that would send shockwaves across the country. A penny that experts now believe shouldn't even exist. But what he found next stunned the entire coin world. The coin had no mint mark, like every Philadelphia penny of the time. Nothing special there. But the surfaces shimmered strangely under light, sharper, cleaner, almost proof-like. It didn't match any known strike from 1979. At first, he thought it was a trick of the eye. Then he weighed it, and the scale told a different story. A weight anomaly. A tiny, almost invisible difference that only the sharpest collectors would notice. That small detail was enough to push him deeper into the mystery, and deeper into the possibility that he was holding something no other collector had ever seen. And as he would soon learn, this tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. He rushed it to a local coin shop. The dealer took one look and froze. Not because the coin looked rare at first glance, but because it didn't look like a regular business strike penny at all. The edges were too clean. The fields were too mirror-like. The features were too crisp. It looked like a proof coin, but Philadelphia wasn't supposed to be producing proof pennies that year. Something was horribly, wonderfully wrong. The dealer turned the coin over, again and again, searching for any flaw that would expose it as altered. But there was nothing. The copper sheen was original. The luster was untouched. The details were razor sharp. It was as if this penny had escaped the mint in a way no coin ever should. But the story only got stranger from here. Collectors started comparing images, analyzing die markers, studying the faintest micro details. Some believed an experimental strike leaked out. Others speculated that a mint employee, working late into the night, accidentally mixed a proof die with circulation planchets. A mistake that should have been caught. A mistake that should have been destroyed. But somehow, one coin survived, and that one coin, that single accidental survivor, walked right into history. But what happened at auction shocked everyone. When the Ohio collector sent the penny in for grading, experts didn't believe it at first. They insisted it must be altered. They insisted it had to be a fake. But the more they analyzed it, the more undeniable it became. The coin was genuine. The strike was real. The details matched no known business die. It was a phantom strike, something that should not exist yet did. The auction house quietly prepared the listing. They expected attention, maybe even a small bidding war. What they got instead was a feeding frenzy. Collectors were shocked. Dealers were calling in from across the country. Wealthy private buyers demanded private previews. Rumors spread like wildfire. The rarest 1979 penny ever found was finally coming to light. When bidding opened, the room erupted. Numbers jumped instantly. 10,000. 50,000. 100,000. People gasped as the bids kept rising. But just when it seemed to settle, one final anonymous bidder dropped an offer that left the entire room silent. Over $1 million for a penny. And with that, the legend of the 1979 no-mint mark miracle was born. But the truth is, the coin's value wasn't just about rarity. It was about the story, a story of impossible survival. A story of a mistake buried inside the mint, overlooked, forgotten, then rediscovered decades later in a dusty jar, waiting for the right pair of eyes. A story that could happen to anyone. Even you. But here's the part that collectors can't stop talking about. Experts now believe there may be more. Not many, maybe only a handful, but enough to keep the dream alive. Enough to send collectors racing through their drawers, coin jars, glove compartments, and coffee cans. Because if another one of these phantom 1979 pennies surfaces, it would unleash another $1 million shockwave across the hobby. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. And lightning might strike again. But before you rush to check your coins, you must know exactly what to look for, because most people examine this penny the wrong way and end up throwing away something extraordinary. Start with the surfaces. A normal 1979 no-mint mark penny will show basic circulation texture. But the valuable one has a strange, almost proof-like shine. The fields reflect light sharply. The details pop with unusual crispness. The lettering looks carved, not stamped. Then check the weight. A tiny deviation, often too small to notice without an accurate scale, separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. That anomaly is the clue that started everything. Next, examine the edges. A rare strike will have cleaner, tighter edges with a finish inconsistent with normal business production. Finally, compare the portrait. On the rare version, Lincoln's profile appears sharper, almost sculpted. Look especially at the hair details and the space between the coat and the field. That's where the mystery reveals itself. If your 1979 penny matches these signs, you may be holding something far more valuable than you ever imagined. And remember this: treasures don't announce themselves. They sit quietly, waiting for the one person willing to look a little closer, the one person whose life is about to change forever. This coin almost ended up in a gas station tip jar, but instead, it became one of the most shocking $1 million discoveries in Lincoln penny history. And the reason why it's worth more than a luxury home? That secret was hidden for nearly 3 decades, until one stunned collector finally exposed it. For years, the 1990 D penny was the coin nobody paid attention to. Just another copper-colored coin passing through millions of hands every single day. But buried inside the ocean of ordinary pennies was a microscopic mistake. A minting error so rare, so unexpected, that it sent dealers scrambling, collectors whispering, and auction rooms spinning into chaos. Because the moment this discovery went public, the price didn't just rise. It exploded. But before we get to the $1 million waiting inside this unsuspecting penny, we have to go back to the beginning, the moment the Denver Mint unknowingly struck a handful of coins with a flaw so unusual, even senior graders missed it at first glance. The story begins with a Colorado coin hunter who had no idea his life was about to change. He wasn't a professional collector. He wasn't a dealer. He was just a man sorting loose change, the same way millions of Americans do every night. But as he slid his fingers through a pile of pennies, one coin didn't feel like the others. It looked normal. But something in his gut told him to take a closer look, and that decision, those 2 seconds of curiosity, turned into the discovery that would shock the entire coin world. Because under bright light, the coin revealed a detail that shouldn't exist, a tiny difference so rare that experts later confirmed only a few examples had ever surfaced. Collectors didn't believe it at first. Dealers said it had to be a mistake. But the test came back, and the truth hit the hobby like a lightning strike. This wasn't just a rare penny. It was one of the most valuable modern Lincoln cents ever created by accident. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. When the first example went to auction, nobody knew what to expect. Some guessed a few $1,000s. Maybe 10,000 if the right bidders showed up. But when the final hammer dropped, the room went silent. Every jaw fell. Every bidder stared in disbelief. The price had climbed past 6 figures, then higher, and then higher still, until that ordinary-looking 1990 penny crossed the unimaginable threshold, selling for the kind of money most people only dream about. It didn't just break expectations, it shattered them, proving once and for all that million-dollar magic still lives in pocket change. But the real shock? That was only the beginning. Because after that sale, collectors around the country started pouring through their change. Entire coin shops turned upside down. People were rushing home from work just to dig through old jars, dusty drawers, and forgotten coffee cans. They weren't just searching, they were chasing a miracle. And every hour, more stories began to surface. A woman in Texas finding one in an old cookie tin. A retired soldier discovering one in a roll from a grocery store. Each discovery sending the value soaring higher, pushing the coin past the $1 million mark, and forcing experts to question how many more of these mysterious pennies were still out there. But this tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. Because the real value of the 1990 penny isn't the date, or the mint, or the usual signs collectors look for. It comes down to a hidden minting mistake that almost no casual viewer sees on their first try. And if you don't know exactly where to look, you'll miss it too. Before we get to the exact markers, you need to hear what happened behind closed doors at the Denver Mint, the part of the story only a few insiders know. Years later, a retired technician quietly admitted that during the early production run, a set of master hubs was used that shouldn't have been used at all. A tiny detail was slightly off, but nobody noticed until tens of thousands of coins had already gone through the presses. Most were caught and destroyed, but a small handful slipped through unnoticed. And those survivors became legends. But here's the twist that keeps collectors awake at night. No one knows exactly how many made it into circulation. Some experts say a few dozen. Others whisper it might be far fewer. But when the numbers are that low, every new discovery changes the market instantly. And the emotional weight behind these finds? It's overwhelming. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. And stories like his made the 1990 the coin nobody wants to ignore anymore. But what happened next made the hobby even more electrifying. When grading services started evaluating these coins, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Mint state examples began crossing their desks, coins that had somehow avoided decades of wear, preserved by accident, waiting for the right eyes to find them. Each one commanded a higher price than the last. And the moment a near-perfect example was certified, the market erupted again. Dealers began offering huge cash incentives, begging collectors to bring in their 1990 pennies for examination. Some shops even launched $1 million penny days, where lines wrapped around buildings as people hoped their everyday change could rewrite their future. But the best part of this story is also the most shocking. Most Americans have handled a 1990 penny at some point. Millions were minted. Countless are still in circulation today. And the rare ones, those few living miracles, look almost identical to the ordinary ones. That means any person, anywhere in the country, could unknowingly be holding one right now. But here's the cliffhanger the entire video has been building toward, the secret that transforms an ordinary 1990 penny into a life-changing treasure. The difference comes down to the design details. Specifically the 1990 NOS-proof hub design features that accidentally made their way into the Denver production process. The font shape of Liberty, the spacing on I in God We Trust, the subtle alignment of the date, and the sharpness of the D mint mark all play a role. The rare examples show a unique combination of proof-style characteristics on a circulation-struck coin, sharper edges, unusual relief patterns, and an alignment flaw that experts can spot instantly once they know what to look for. But you don't need to be an expert. Here's how anyone, absolutely anyone, can identify the rare 1990 D pennies worth up to $1.40 million. First, place the coin under a bright light and tilt it slowly. Look at the lettering, especially Liberty. The valuable examples have unusually crisp, razor-sharp edges that look too clean for a normal circulating strike. Then move to the date. The rare ones show an ever so slight leftward alignment, barely noticeable to the naked eye, but obvious once you compare it to a normal 1990 D penny. Next, focus on the D mint mark. On valuable examples, it appears more deeply impressed, sitting just a fraction lower than usual and echoing the appearance of a proof-style punch. Most people overlook this immediately, but it's one of the key indicators. Finally, check the overall luster. Even circulated examples have an unusual sheen, almost like a hybrid between satin and proof, because of the unexpected dye characteristics used during the early strike. Miss any of these details, and you might skip right past a fortune. But if your coin shows all of them, you may be holding one of the rarest modern Lincoln cents ever created, a coin that has already sold for over $1 million. And one that continues to rise in value with every new discovery and every new collector entering the race. And that brings us to the final truth, one that sends chills through the collecting world every time it's spoken. This penny almost disappeared forever. It was nearly tossed into a jar, forgotten in a glove box, left to rot in a dusty old coffee can, until one collector realized what he was holding. What most people believed was just an ordinary 1976 D Lincoln penny had a secret no one expected, a secret powerful enough to turn a single cent into as much as $1.5 million. And when the truth surfaced, collectors across the country were stunned. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't supposed to exist. The mint never intended this tiny copper coin to carry a mistake so valuable that dealers now fight just for the chance to examine one. But once the first example surfaced, the entire coin world froze, asking the same question: how did a penny from 1976 suddenly become one of the most valuable pieces of modern American change ever found? And could another one still be hiding in your pocket right now? The story begins the year America celebrated its 200th birthday, a time when the U.S. Mint was under enormous pressure. Billions of coins were rushing out of Denver, and quality control was pushed to the edge. Somewhere in that chaos, a small number of 1976 D Lincoln pennies left the mint with a flaw so subtle, so rare, that it took decades for collectors to even recognize what they were looking at. For years, people handled these coins without realizing they were touching a fortune. They were spent at gas stations, dropped between couch cushions, lost in vending machines, million-dollar coins hiding in plain sight. But the first real shock came when a collector digging through old pocket change noticed something unusual on the reverse of a worn 1976 D penny. A tiny, almost ghost-like doubling that didn't match anything listed in the major coin guides. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light. But when he placed it under a jeweler's loupe, his hands began to shake. The doubling wasn't on the surface. It wasn't damage. It was baked into the coin during minting, a rare and dramatic doubling on the lettering so sharp that specialists later called it one of the most stunning errors ever discovered on a modern penny. And when that coin went to auction, what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Bidders erupted. Dealers scrambled. Collectors whispered that it might be the rarest 1976 D variety anyone had ever seen. By the time the final hammer fell, the humble penny had climbed into the upper hundreds of thousands, and experts now believe the finest examples could push well past $1 million. But the story doesn't end there. Because every time one of these rare 1976 D errors surfaces, it reveals another shocking detail. Some show doubling on Liberty. Others on the date. A few have dramatic die breaks stretching across Lincoln's bust like lightning frozen in time. Each variety tells a slightly different story about what was happening on the mint floor during that frantic bicentennial year. And the more experts dig into the mystery, the more convinced they become that only a tiny handful exist in high grades. Maybe fewer than 10. Maybe fewer than 5. Maybe you could be the next person to find one. Collectors were stunned when a second example surfaced from a man who almost threw his change away. He was about to dump a pile of pennies into a Coinstar machine when something about the date caught his eye. The D mint mark looked slightly misplaced, drifting ever so slightly lower than it should. It was the kind of detail most people ignore, but something told him to check it. Under magnification, he realized that the mint mark was punched by hand, a feature long abandoned, and the misalignment matched one of the rarest positions known for that year. That 1-cent coin earned him more than his annual salary. But here's where the story gets even more unbelievable. Some 1970-60 pennies show a wrong planchet error, struck on a copper planchet meant for another denomination entirely. These coins ring differently. They weigh differently. They feel different in your hand. And they can easily cross the $1 million mark because they shouldn't exist at all. The mint has strict rules to prevent these accidents. Yet in 1976, with the rush of bicentennial production, mistakes slipped through, creating coins that today are considered modern treasures. Dealers who specialize in high-end era coins say the 1970-60 is a time bomb waiting to go off. Every time a new variety is discovered, the price of the previous ones explodes. One expert said, "The right example, in the right grade, could hit numbers we've never seen before for a modern Lincoln cent." In other words, we may not have seen the highest price yet. $1 million levels might just be the beginning. But the true emotional punch of this story comes from the everyday people who made these discoveries. Not experts, not dealers, not lifelong collectors. Regular folks. A retired mechanic who found one in an Altoids tin. A schoolteacher who spotted a strange texture near the motto on a penny in her purse. A teenager who discovered a dramatic die crack stretching across the reverse and sent it in for grading on a whim. These are the stories that electrify the hobby, because every discovery proves the same thing. Life-changing coins are still out there, and they are being found by people who never expected to become part of coin collecting history. And the 1970-60 penny continues to shock experts because new varieties are still being uncovered. Each one forces collectors to reevaluate what's possible. This tiny coin has become a symbol of hope, a reminder that the next $1 million discovery might be hiding in a single cent someone hasn't looked closely at yet. But what makes a 1970-60 penny worth this kind of money? What tiny details separate an ordinary coin from a once-in-a-lifetime treasure? This is where the mystery becomes a roadmap. First, check the date and mint mark. Look for doubling on the 1976, especially a sharp shadow effect on the 7 and 6. Look closely at the D mint mark. If it looks misplaced, tilted, or slightly higher or lower than usual, you might have a rare mint mark variety. Next, examine Lincoln's profile. Some of the $1 million varieties show extra thickness on the lettering or doubling around Lincoln's nose, chin, and jacket. This kind of doubling is always raised, never flat, and never looks like damage. Then, turn to the reverse. Carefully inspect the words 1 cent and United States of America. Any signs of spreading, doubling, or thickening are major red flags, the good kind of red flags. Some of these reverse varieties are the most valuable of all. Finally, weigh the coin if you can. A normal 1970-60 penny should weigh 3.11 grams. But if yours is struck on the wrong planchet, the weight could be off, and that's where the big money is. A wrong planchet error can take a common coin and launch it into $1 million territory instantly. The biggest mistake new collectors make is assuming their coin is damaged, dirty, or worn. But the most valuable errors in U.S. history often look unremarkable at first glance. The truth is simple, the value hides in the tiny details, and most people never bother to look, and that's why this story matters. Because right now, sitting somewhere in a drawer, a jar, or a forgotten cup holder, another 1970-60 penny could be waiting. A penny capable of rewriting someone's life. A penny capable of selling for over $1 million. And that penny could be yours. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. This coin almost slipped through history unnoticed, a tiny copper red penny from 1982 that nearly disappeared into pocket change forever. But one single mistake buried deep inside this coin's creation has turned it into one of the most unbelievable discoveries the coin world has ever seen. And today, collectors say it could be worth up to $1.6 million. Most people would never look twice at a 1982 D penny. It looks ordinary, harmless, like the kind of coin you toss into a gas station tray without thinking. But this is the coin that has experts whispering, dealers scrambling, and treasure hunters checking every jar of loose change like their life depends on it. Because behind that tiny D mint mark lies a story so bizarre, so rare, and so unexpected, the entire hobby was left stunned. In 1982, the US Mint was rushing through one of the biggest transitions in coin-making history. After decades of producing solid copper pennies, the Mint suddenly switched to a new metal, a lighter zinc core coated in copper. The change was massive. Mistakes were guaranteed. But no one could have predicted that one of these mistakes would become a $1 million miracle hiding in plain sight. And it all begins with a single, tiny error, an error so microscopic, so elusive, that most collectors walk right past it. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Because somewhere inside the Denver Mint that year, a few 1982 D coins were struck on the wrong planchet, using the old, heavier copper blanks instead of the new zinc ones. A mix-up so improbable that many experts once thought it didn't exist. For years, collectors debated it like a myth. Rumors spread. Stories whispered. Some believed it was impossible. Others swore they had held one. But then, the unbelievable happened. A collector, digging through an ordinary set of pennies, spotted something strange. His 1982 D coin felt heavier, thicker, solid in a way that didn't match the others. He weighed it, and the scale flashed a number that nearly knocked him off his chair. 3.11 grams. The weight of a pure copper penny. The realization hit him instantly. He wasn't holding a common 1982 coin, he was holding a ghost from the Mint's past. A copper 1982 D penny, a coin that wasn't supposed to exist. A coin with a story that would send shockwaves across the hobby. Dealers were shocked. Collectors were speechless. The discovery spread like wildfire. Overnight, this ordinary-looking penny transformed into a legendary treasure whispered about at coin shows, studied by experts, and hunted by thousands of people hoping their common change might hide the same miracle. And yet, the story becomes even stranger, because the Mint struck billions, yes, billions, of pennies that year. Copper, zinc, different sizes, different designs. It was chaos behind the scenes. And that chaos opened the door for a handful of these rare wrong planchet copper 1982 D pennies to slip through the cracks and into the pockets of everyday Americans. For years, they sat in junk drawers, coffee cans, glove compartments, quietly waiting for someone to realize what they truly were. But here's where the story takes its most dramatic twist of all. One of these rare 1982 D copper pennies didn't just capture attention, it broke the market. When it surfaced at auction, bidding erupted instantly. Dealers raised their paddles without hesitation. Collectors battled like their careers depended on it. And by the time the final bid crashed down, the room went silent. Because the price was unlike anything the hobby had seen for a modern penny. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, pushing into $1 million territory. A single cent, suddenly worth more than most people's homes. And experts believe that the finest surviving example, one in near-perfect condition, could easily reach $1.6 million if it ever enters the market again. Think about that. One penny. One mistake. One unbelievable piece of history that turned a casual collector's pocket change into a $1 million treasure. But here's the part that gives every viewer watching right now a heart-pounding reason to check their pockets. Most people don't realize this, but the 1982 penny is one of the most complicated coins ever made. There are 7 different varieties: copper, zinc, large date, small date, different mints. It's chaos in the best possible way. And that chaos makes this hunt more exciting, more unpredictable, and more rewarding than almost any other search in modern coin collecting. And every few minutes, someone new posts online that they found a strange 1982 D penny. Heavy. Odd. Mysterious. Hope rises. Phone cameras turn on. Scales come out. Some are false alarms, zinc pennies that trick the eye, but others? They leave collectors shaking, breathless, wondering if lightning struck again. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. It all comes down to the weight. The metal. The feel. You can't rely on the color. You can't rely on guesswork. The only way to know is to weigh the coin. Copper pennies weigh about 3.11 grams. Zinc pennies weigh only 2.5 grams. That tiny difference, that fraction of a gram, is the key that separates a 1-cent coin from a $1 million miracle. But the emotional punch behind this story isn't just the value. It's the idea, the unbelievable, thrilling idea, that someone out there, right now, might be holding an unseen fortune without knowing it, and that's why collectors aged 30 to 70 are rushing to search their old change jars. Because they remember 1982. They remember copper pennies. They remember the old, heavy sound a copper coin makes when it hits a tabletop. And they know that one of these rare 1982 copper pennies could be sitting somewhere in their home, waiting to be discovered. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world again. New discoveries, new rumors, new weights being tested, it fueled the fire. And now, more than ever, the 1982 penny has become a legend of modern treasure hunting. A coin that keeps hope alive for millions of collectors who dream of finding the one coin that changes everything. And now, here is exactly what you need to look for. If you have a 1982 penny, place it on a scale that measures in grams. If it weighs around 2.5, it's zinc, common. But if it weighs close to 3.11 grams, your life could change instantly. Look closely at the date. Look for the Denver D under the year. Then weigh it again to confirm. Don't scratch it. Don't clean it. Don't mishandle it. A single mistake could cost you thousands. Collectors were shocked when the first example surfaced. Dealers are still whispering about what the next one might bring. And the truth is simple. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. There's a moment every collector remembers, the moment they hear a story so unbelievable, so shocking, that it makes them run to their pocket change and start searching. And this story begins with a penny that almost nobody cared about. A penny so ordinary, so common, that millions of Americans tossed it into jars, glove boxes, desk drawers, never realizing that one of them would one day explode in value and shake the entire coin community. That penny is the 1964 Lincoln cent with no mint mark. And one specific example, hidden in plain sight for decades, would rise from complete obscurity to become a $1 million miracle. This coin almost ended up in a charity jar. The man who owned it nearly gave it away. But before he did, something caught his eye, a tiny, nearly invisible detail that made him stop. And that pause, that single moment of hesitation, turned an ordinary penny into a life-changing discovery worth up to $1.7 million. Collectors still talk about it today, because this wasn't supposed to happen. A coin from one of the most heavily produced years in U.S. history wasn't supposed to reach legendary status, wasn't supposed to command a fortune, wasn't supposed to stun every expert who laid eyes on it. But it did. And what happened next stunned the entire coin world. To understand why, you have to go back to 1964. The United States Mint was under enormous pressure. Silver shortages, production delays, and political tension created chaos in coin production. Billions of coins were rushed through the presses. Dies cracked. Planchets slipped. Mint workers were exhausted, machines ran non-stop, and quality control was stretched past the breaking point. Hidden inside that frenzy, one tiny mistake slipped through, a minting error so rare, so impossible, that only a handful of people in history have ever seen it in person. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. The man who found it didn't think he had anything special. He'd collected coins for years, digging through rolls, searching old jars, checking bank bags late at night after work. He did it for fun. For the thrill. For the dream that one day a single coin might change everything. And then one morning, While sorting through old change he had nearly forgotten about, he spotted a 1964 penny that just didn't look right. The color was different. The strike was sharper. And the weight, when placed on his scale, wasn't what he expected. His heart started pounding. He ran his finger along the rim and felt something unusual, something coins from that year simply shouldn't have. But what happened next sent shockwaves through the hobby. When a grading company examined it, they froze. The room went silent. Experts examined the surfaces under magnification, studying every ridge, every contour, every microscopic flaw. And when they saw the truth, they were stunned. The coin wasn't made from the metal it should have been. It wasn't struck under normal conditions. It wasn't just rare, it was a once-in-a-generation mistake, a freak survivor of a chaotic minting era. And collectors were shocked when the first whispers about it hit the community. A 1964 penny, worth more than $1 million? Nobody believed it, until the auction hammer fell and the price stunned everyone watching. Dealers rushed to find others. Collectors tore open old rolls. Pawn shops received calls nonstop. People across the country emptied junk drawers they hadn't touched in decades, hoping lightning would strike twice. Even now, years later, the story still feels unreal. A penny from a year known for mass production, suddenly elevated to the ranks of the rarest coins in the world. But the truth is undeniable. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. And the mystery behind this coin only grows deeper the more you learn. Halfway through the auction, as bids climbed higher and higher, the room changed. People leaned forward. Voices hushed. Cameras clicked. Collectors who had spent their entire lives around rare coins suddenly felt their hands trembling. When the final bid flashed on the screen, the crowd erupted. The number was nearly unbelievable, over $1 million for a 1964 penny with no mint mark. And as the news spread, more experts started re-examining coins from that year. They realized that the mint had experimented with different planchets, different dies, and different striking pressures that left behind microscopic clues. Some of those coins, extremely few, carried the hallmarks of those forgotten experiments. And those hallmarks are exactly what you need to look for. But before we get to that, here's the part of the story nobody expects. After the auction, the original finder didn't celebrate like most people would. He cried. Not because he was overwhelmed by money, but because he realized something deeper. For years, he had searched for a life-changing coin, almost giving up dozens of times. And then, from a simple jar of forgotten change, came the miracle he always dreamed about. That emotional moment, a man holding a penny that was now worth more than $1 million, became the symbol of hope for collectors everywhere. The moment that proved the next $1 million coin is still out there. But here's the twist that keeps collectors awake at night. Most of these rare 1964 pennies have yet to be found. They're still hiding. In old jars. In forgotten boxes. In estate sales. In the corner of a dusty drawer. And the only thing standing between an ordinary penny and a life-changing discovery is knowledge. So here's exactly what you need to look for if you want to identify the 1964 no-mint mark penny that could be worth up to $1.7 million. First, the strike. The rare examples are unusually sharp, with crisp details in Lincoln's hair and beard. The lettering is bold, with clean edges that almost glow under light. These coins look like they were struck with more pressure than normal, leaving deeper impressions in the metal. Second, the weight. A standard 1964 copper penny weighs about 3.11 grams. But the $1 million variety deviates from that, either slightly lower or slightly higher depending on the planchet error. Any unusual weight reading is a major red flag that you may have something special. Third, the surface. The rare examples have a different metallic sheen. They don't tone like most 1964 pennies. They hold their luster longer, and under magnification the metal shows patterns inconsistent with regular production. Fourth, the rim. The edges on these rare coins are more pronounced, almost as if the coin was struck twice or under abnormal die pressure. Many collectors completely overlook this, but it's one of the strongest signs. And finally, the detail that so many people miss, the overall feel of the coin. Rare 1964 errors simply don't look like the millions of ordinary examples. There is a sharpness, a crispness, a density to the details that jumps out the moment you learn what to look for. If you ever find a 1964 penny that looks even slightly different from the rest, shinier, sharper, heavier, lighter, set it aside immediately. Because this one coin, this tiny copper piece that millions of people have ignored for 60 years, has changed lives before, and it can change yours next. And remember this: the most valuable coins in history weren't found by experts. They were found by ordinary people who were curious enough to look twice. Whether it's in your pocket, in your car, or in an old jar you haven't touched in years, the next $1 million penny could be waiting for you right now. This coin almost ended up in the trash, and yet today, collectors whisper about it as one of the most extraordinary discoveries in modern American coin history. A simple 2005 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, hiding a secret powerful enough to turn ordinary pocket change into a life-changing fortune. Because one of these coins didn't just sell high, it shocked the entire hobby when experts valued it at up to $1.8 million. And the craziest part? Most people walk past it every single day without knowing what they're really holding. The story begins in the early months of 2005, inside the buzzing halls of the Philadelphia Mint. Billions of pennies were being struck. Nothing unusual. Nothing special. But somewhere between the clatter of presses and the heat of the dies, something unexpected slipped through. A tiny mistake. An unnoticed imperfection. A quiet miracle that went completely unnoticed, until one man, an everyday collector, spotted something that didn't look right. He found the coin and change from a gas station. Just a dull copper penny lying at the bottom of his pocket. At first glance, absolutely nothing stood out. No shimmer, no unusual color, no dramatic damage. But when he looked again, something pulled him in. Lincoln's portrait wasn't quite right. The details felt sharper, deeper, almost carved instead of stamped. And the coin's surface had a strange satin glow that no ordinary business strike penny should ever have. He almost tossed it aside. But something told him to look closer. What he saw next changed his life. There was no mint mark. Now in 2005, that wasn't unusual. Philadelphia pennies don't carry a mint mark. But what was unusual was the combination of the missing mint mark with the coin's unexpected texture, its razor-sharp strike, and a faint doubling that danced across Lincoln's jaw and the motto above his head. A type of doubling that shouldn't exist. A form so clean that even seasoned dealers would second-guess their eyes. Collectors were stunned when he showed it around. One dealer's hands literally shook as he held it under a loupe. Another stepped back and whispered that single word every collector longs to hear. Impossible! But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Experts examined the coin and discovered that it wasn't just a regular strike. It appeared to be a mysterious hybrid, a business strike struck with dies that behaved like proof dies, or possibly an experimental finish that slipped into circulation. The pressure was higher. The details were bolder. And the microscopic markers around Lincoln's coat collar suggested a rare die variety, one that may have only survived on a handful of coins. Within days, rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers at auctions. Private calls between dealers. People digging through their jars, their drawers, their old rolls of 2005 pennies, praying to be the next lucky one. This wasn't just another penny story. This was a modern-day treasure hunt. But this tiny detail is why the value exploded, the doubling around Liberty and In God We Trust wasn't damage, wasn't machine doubling, and wasn't the typical shelf-like shift most people see on common errors. This doubling had depth. It had separation. It had the bold steps that experts rely on when declaring a true doubled die. The first authenticated example hit the private market quietly. No public announcement. No flashing news headline. Just a silent, private deal that would swirl through collector gossip for years. And when the rumored price leaked, the coin community froze. Up to $1.8 million. Dealers were speechless. Longtime collectors were floored. A coin struck in 2005, a coin millions of people handled, was suddenly worth more than homes, more than cars, more than some retirement accounts. And not because it was ancient. Not because it was rare from birth. but because a tiny, unpredictable minting miracle formed in a single split-second moment nearly 2 decades ago. But the story didn't end there. Because the moment that first sale became public knowledge, a frenzy erupted. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. And the search for a second example became almost mythic. People tore open old rolls. Metal detectorists scanned parks, beaches, fairgrounds. Coin shops were flooded with jars of 2005 pennies from hopeful treasure hunters. A few dealers even offered rewards for high-grade 2005 pennies with unusual features. But here's the twist that no one expected. A second coin surfaced, and was nearly overlooked. It came from a retired couple cleaning out an old RV. They were about to dump 3 decades of change into a Coinstar machine when the husband noticed the penny's unusual glow. Something about the way light reflected off Lincoln's cheeks seemed too smooth, too perfect. He set it aside without thinking. Weeks later, a simple magnifying glass in their garage revealed the same breathtaking doubling. The same razor-sharp strike. The same mysterious finish. Their discovery sent shockwaves through the hobby. It proved something huge. The first coin wasn't a one-off. Lightning had struck twice. But what happened after authentication was even more unbelievable. Auction houses scrambled to contact the couple. Big names in the hobby began making offers before the coin even reached grading. It felt like watching history repeat itself. The quiet tension, the desperate phone calls, the fierce competition behind closed doors. And then came the moment that still gives collectors chills. The whispered valuation came back, once again, up to $1.8 million. And with that second number, the hunt became legendary. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. Even today, 2 decades later, only a tiny handful of these 2005 no-mint mark Lincoln pennies with this mysterious hybrid strike and doubling have ever been verified. No one knows how many exist. No one knows how many were spent, lost, dropped, or thrown away. And no one knows whether a forgotten stash is sitting somewhere, in a coin roll, a junk drawer, or a coffee can under somebody's bed. But this tiny detail is why most people miss it. The doubling is subtle from far away. Only when light hits it just right does the depth reveal itself. And the satin-like finish can appear normal if the coin is dirty or worn. This is why so many incredible discoveries are sitting in plain sight, waiting for someone with patience and sharp eyes to recognize what everyone else overlooks. So here's how you identify the treasure that could change your life. Start with the surfaces. A 2005 Philadelphia penny should look like any other copper-plated zinc coin, shiny, sometimes streaky, often dull. But the valuable one has a smoother, almost silky surface, like a cross between a business strike and a proof. Next, study Lincoln's jawline and the motto. You're looking for clean, separated doubling, not flat, not smeared, not shelf-like, but bold, layered impressions that show depth. Then check the word liberty. The rare variety shows doubling that seems almost carved, like 2 distinct impressions overlapping each other. Finally, examine the edges. Some examples show slightly higher strike pressure, giving the rim a sharper, more sculpted appearance than a normal penny. If all of these signs line up, you may be holding the same miracle coin that stunned the entire coin world.